The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website at agingpartners@lincoln.ne.gov.
The ticking of a clock is the heartbeat of a home. It's time for Live and Learn. I am so pleased to introduce my guest today, Mark Berkey, owner of City Clock Company, and his son, Taylor Berkey. Welcome to you both.
Thank you. Good morning.
Mark, if I could please begin with you. Our program has been focusing on third generation businesses.
Yeah.
And with the addition of Taylor, yours is becoming just that.
Right.
How does that make you feel?
Very proud and pleased. It's really exciting to be able to have Taylor follow in my footsteps. Hopefully it's something that he enjoys doing and to carry on the business. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's real exciting.
Well, in talking with him, I can tell he certainly does, so
yeah.
That's wonderful. Could you please tell us how City Clock began?
Well, my father started the business back in 1953.
Okay.
He purchased the building or a business from a Latvian gentleman, and it's been in probably 5 or 6 locations since then.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, something that he started out doing, working in a factory, building bomb sites for planes during the war.
Oh, really?
And he enjoyed working with his hands, so yeah, he
And
went
so
to
somehow
school.
that transferred into
Yeah.
clocks and watches.
Right.
What was the focus of the original business?
It was clocks, but mostly jewelry and watches. He went to school in Colorado, in Denver, and learned watchmaking and clockmaking, and yeah.
I
So
see.
kind of focused on everything
Sure.
with time.
And
yeah.
the business has moved to various locations in Lincoln.
Correct, yeah.
And you
yeah.
are now at 48th and Old Cheney.
Right.
Correct?
Mhm. Yes.
Well, that
yeah.
is wonderful, and I'm sure moving a business like that is not easy.
No, and that's why this time, always in the past, we had always leased a building, and this time we decided to purchase because of that
Sure,
reason. We
sure.
didn't want to move anymore,
Yeah.
and getting to the age where it'd be nice to have something that you can count on and stay at. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
So, yeah, we own
it's
this
wonderful
building.
location.
Yeah, thank you.
So when did you start in the family business?
It was 74. I started, was doing construction, which I enjoyed working with my hands, and the construction field kind of slowed down at that time, so went to work with Dad and just never left.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
He couldn't get rid of me.
And I understand your wife, Deb, who is a co-owner of
Right.
the shop with you,
Yeah.
actually started working in the business before you did?
Yeah, she actually was in sales, and Dad needed somebody to help for Christmas season and hours, and so yeah, she started working about a year before I started there. So
I
yeah.
see.
And she's been there kind of off and on ever since, as well as I. So,
Sure. Well, I want to attribute the quote that I started the show with to her, because
Yeah,
when I was
that's
talking to her, she said that, and I thought it was beautifully said.
Yeah.
So did you always want to work in the shop as you were growing up?
Not growing up. I mean, I always went down there, and you know, it was very interesting. You know, as a small child to see all the things going on that they did. But yeah, it wasn't anything that I thought that would be what I would do when I grew up. But it just, everything turned out that way.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's a real interesting field, so I'm glad it did.
So how did you learn this craft?
Mainly from my dad. I took
Okay.
some courses, but I think mainly from my dad and the other gentleman that learned from this Latvian gentleman. He, you know, learned old school over in Europe. So yeah, mostly from them, apprenticing. Yeah.
So there are certainly many facets to this business. What do you enjoy the most about it?
I think the most enjoyable thing is taking something that's 100, 200 years old that maybe hasn't run for a long time, and getting that doing what it's supposed to be doing, you know, telling time, and keeping a family heirloom going is, you know.
Bringing it back to life, really.
Yeah, kinda,
for
yeah.
more service to,
Exactly, yeah.
more families. That's
Right.
lovely. So now, Taylor, you are joining the company.
Yep.
What age were you when you started to work in the shop?
Oh, I think I had to be probably 14 or 15. I started part-time in the summers. You know, when I was out of school, I'd come to the shop and clean the store or help Mom organize boxes. And then as I got a little older, I could start, you know, maybe disassembling some clocks to get in the cleaner, and just kind of baby steps into different facets of the business, not just doing one particular thing.
I see, I see. So now you have graduated from college.
Yep.
And did you actually take a formal course?
In actual college, I took business courses.
Okay.
And then after college, I took a clock making home study course where they would send you materials, you would complete the courses, and then mail them back off for grading.
Okay.
So I got through that and learned a decent amount, but not a ton that I didn't already know or that my father couldn't already teach me. So
I'm sure the hands-on training is the most important.
yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes. So have you always known that you wanted to take part in this business?
Not always. It was when I was younger. It was just an easy job to be a young kid. 14 years old. Parents worked there, so I just kind of started and eased into it. And then once I started progressing in the skills and the knowledge and being able to do different things, it was nice to be able to accomplish and say that yes, this is what I want to do.
Oh, that's lovely. What does it mean to you then now to be able to take part in this business?
I think, like Dad said, it's kind of just a pride in establishing that this is definitely a family business. That it's just us there, and that I get to continue that on, and at least have the potential for a fourth generation or other family members or whoever may want to work there, have just another sustainable business.
I can understand that.
It's kind of exciting too to see him learn from not just me in clock repair, but from his mom out in sales and retail.
Yes.
I mean, he has got, picking up the best of both, it seems like. I mean, he really does very well out with the public, and that's attributed to Deb. So, yeah.
So he can cover all the bases,
Right.
so to speak.
Yeah, he does very well. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, Mark, let's start to talk about the evolution of clocks. Certainly, styles have changed over the years. I believe we're going to start showing some clocks, and we'll have you talk about each one and just how cabinetry has changed and,
Right.
and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it started out, years ago. I think the first time device was a sundial, and then it went on to hourglasses, water clocks. But back then, it's not like now. The timekeeping, even some of the older clocks, with the wood movements, even older than that, they would just have hour hands. The timekeeping wasn't as precise as it is today.
I see.
But the old wood movement clocks, the gears and everything were made of wood, and what they used to lubricate them was animal fat. And I think that's where the nursery rhyme Hickory Dickory Dock came from, was the mice would run up the top of the clocks and to get to the animal fat and eat
how
that, and then when it would strike,
interesting.
they would, all the motion, they would run down.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's
I
just,
love that.
Yeah, kind of interesting. The whole
It's
history.
amazing that a wooden clock could function in that
Oh,
manner.
yeah.
Totally wooden.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We get some in that teeth are broken off, and we'd have to, make new teeth for, and that kind
Really?
of thing. Yeah, it's
And they
Wow.
lasted fairly well. You'd think a
Yeah.
wood clock being fairly disposable, but these are 200 years old, and they're
Exactly.
coming out, considering the age,
Right.
they're still in decent
Lasted
working
longer
condition.
than
Absolutely.
Still will
Any
run.
of the
Yeah,
modern ones.
still will
Yep.
work,
Yes, yes. All right, well, let's move on to another clock. It's called a master clock. What is this one all about?
These are probably early 1900s, 1920,
Okay.
1930. They're electric devices, a mechanical device that is wound by electricity, and it will activate bell ringers. This particular one was from a school up in north central Nebraska,
Okay.
and would operate bells, where now it's all electronic and
Wow.
that run the bell systems in schools. So,
Interesting,
yeah.
interesting. This is a Romeo and Juliet clock. I think this is beautiful.
yeah, this one is a European clock, French clock, and the European clocks, they're not considered antiques until they're over 200 years old. I mean, they've been making clocks for a lot longer than us in the States.
True.
So the French clocks, yeah, they're high quality, but they, are very old. This one here probably is 1920s, 30s,
It's
something
beautiful,
like that.
just
But yes,
elegant.
yeah.
So certainly the mechanics of the clocks are basically the same, even though the cabinetry might have changed.
Right, pretty much. Yeah, the movements haven't changed drastically. For hundreds of years by the way they operate and what they do.
So we're looking at a movement on screen. Can you tell us a little bit about how this works?
That one, the early clocks, were the power that's supplied to the clock were weights. This one has mainsprings, coiled spring steel that actually runs the gear train. And this one is probably early, like 1905,
Okay.
an American-made clock.
I see.
Movement,
I
yeah.
see. All right. We're now going to show a clock that is powered entirely by air, the Atmos clock. I think this is amazing too.
Yeah, to me as well. I mean, the Atmos clock is the most precise mechanical clock made. I mean, it's
Really?
many man-hours in making these. Are all fabricated by hand. They're all, but it is the atmospheric temperature change that actually winds the mechanism. There's a bellow inside that expands and contracts, and that's what winds the mechanism. So you never have to wind it. It's pretty much a perpetual.
That's a plus, never
device.
having to wind it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think I need one of those.
yeah, they are nice.
That's another Atmos clock, and then we'll be following that with the Swinging Lady clock, which again is another Atmos clock, but you can talk a little bit more about that one. I love that.
Yeah, the Swinging Lady is made by Ansonia. It's kind of a counterbalance mechanism that swings on a post that the statue holds. It's a mechanical 8-day key wind movement.
Oh, okay.
Not an Atmos clock. I mean, it isn't run by atmosphere.
I
It is
see.
run by a mainspring that you actually wind once a week.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
yeah, where the Atmos clock will wind itself, this one
Sure.
you have to actually wind,
Okay,
like
well,
most clocks.
Good distinction.
Yes.
Thank you for making that. Are there brands throughout the years that have really held their own value that we would still know today?
Yeah, there are brands that have been around a long time.
Okay.
American clocks like the Ansonia, Seth Thomas. Unfortunately, none of them are around today. I mean, in the last, I'd say 20 years, a lot of the old clock manufacturers in the States have gone by the wayside. With the advent of quartz, battery-powered movements, a lot of people aren't purchasing the old mechanical clocks. So, yeah.
Sure, sure. Now, I know you said a European clock isn't an antique until it's 200 years old. How about an American clock?
American usually is classified antique after it's about 100 years old. Early 1900s or older would be classified as an antique. For
And
the
can you
Americans.
tell on an American clock the year it was made somehow?
More by how the movement is made.
Okay.
Some of the older movements, the movements were held together by taper pins. The newer ones after 1860 were held together with screws or nuts. So that's one way to tell age, but then there's a lot of clocks, a lot of information out on Americans, unlike the Europeans that we don't have a whole lot on. So,
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
There's a pretty intricate reference series by an author that takes a pretty in-depth look at all the different clocks and can give you values and ages and how much they even cost when you purchased them back in 1906.
I see.
So
So when did digital clocks come into fashion?
I think that's about when I started working at City Clock in the mid 70s, early 70s, I think is when the advent of digital.
Okay.
And quartz was right around that same time when
okay.
they became popular.
I see.
Probably late 70s. Before that, the battery-powered movements were actual mechanical movements, weren't used. A quartz crystal wasn't used. It was a little mainspring that the battery wound. So
I see. I
Yeah.
see. Okay. You have a whole wall full of cuckoo clocks in your shop, which I find charming.
Yeah.
So we'll show a couple pictures of those while you talk about cuckoo clocks.
Cuckoo clocks, most of them were imported in from the Black Forest in Germany. That's probably the main place. They have the woods. They're all hand carved. Very intricate. Some of them have musical movements with dancing figures. A lot of animation going on the cuckoo clocks.
Yes,
But,
yes.
Yeah, they're very popular.
Children are always attracted to cuckoo clocks.
Oh, my granddaughter, every time she comes to the shop, that's the first place she wants to go to. is
I
the
can
cuckoo clocks,
imagine.
yes.
So of all the variations of clocks, I think we think of the grandfather clock as being a very important family heirloom to pass on. Can you talk about special care that a grandfather clock might take?
Yeah, grandfather clocks, like most clocks, I mean, they need to be cleaned and oiled periodically, usually around every 8 years or so.
Okay.
Used to be about every 2 or 3 years they should be oiled, but with the advent of synthetic oils, they hold their properties a lot longer, and they don't need to be cleaned and oiled quite as often.
Okay.
But yeah, the grandfather clock, I mean, that is the oldest clock made is the floor clock, hall clock, or grandfather.
And the moon dials on grandfather clocks are always important and very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, they think it's the actual moving of the moon and the sun through the day, but it's actually telling when there's a full moon or a new moon, and a lot of people are, you're right, interested in that aspect of the clock. I mean, it does a lot of things. So.
And you had one clock in your shop that was particularly interesting because it had no numbers on it. It told what day of the week it was, and it's called a day clock.
Right, they just recently came out with that. I think with the advent of the older generation, really after you retire, you don't need to worry as much as far as the hour.
There you go.
You worry about the day and that kind of thing, and
Sure.
and you kind of lose track of days. And so I think that was the advent of the day clock.
It's a great idea.
Yeah,
Great idea.
yeah, it is.
So Taylor, what part of this business do you seem to enjoy the most?
Well, there's so many different little parts and pieces in between owning your own business, having a repair department, and a retail department, that it's kind of hard just to pick one. I think I like to be well versed, or the most enjoyable part is to be able to do all of it.
Yes.
Be able to
And it
offer
sounds like you do
somebody
that
a
very
little bit
well.
of everything. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you plan to bridge the gap between the younger generation to value an older clock?
Yeah, I think it'd more so just be awareness and just expressing to them that this is something that your great grandma had on her mantle, or received for a wedding gift, something like that, and that it's not rudimentary or archaic to keep it going. That it's it's a pretty easy process. So it's just an easy, nice thing to be able to take care of.
So as the years go by, how do you plan to find parts for all of these very old clocks? How do you do that
Well,
now?
this
That
wonderful
has to be
father
a
I've got
challenge.
here,
Okay.
he's quite the stockpiler.
You would
So
need to be.
we just have buckets and tubs and just all kinds of parts, movements, and clocks. And because someday,
Really?
for a lot of clocks, even right now, we can't get parts and pieces for them.
I
so it's
bet.
either find an old one or build a one-off one, and it's just too much time and expense for a lot of people to lay out that kind of money to build their parts and pieces for their clocks.
Yes. So you have a lot on hand.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yep, and probably only to get more.
Yes, I
And
can
that's the
imagine.
nice thing about a third generation business that has been around, for 60 plus years, that you collect a lot of things over the
Sure.
over the years. So
Sure.
it's good to hold on to those
That's
things. In my mind,
understandable.
anyway.
So you mentioned 60 years. This is a big anniversary year for your store. Could you tell us about that?
It is, yeah. We're having a celebration the second week of September.
Okay.
We'll have giveaways of clocks. We're planning on several nights having tours of the facility, not just the retail that everybody can see, but have them come to the back repair department and see what goes on back there.
How
So,
interesting.
yeah, we hope that, whenever we give tours to people, that's something that they're
Really
very
enjoy
interested
that.
in. Yeah.
Sure. And I also understand you're installing a street clock.
Yeah, we purchased from a company in Ohio, in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Verdon Clock Company. They've been around probably since 1870, I think, or 1850. One of the older clock manufacturers of street clocks and tower clocks. So we're purchasing, a four-sided street clock from them, and should be installed before our celebration.
So that will become a Lincoln landmark at 48th
We hope
and
so,
Old
yeah.
Cheney.
We hope it draws
I think
attention.
it will.
Yeah,
I think
that's-
it will.
would be good.
I'd like to end our conversation with just one quirky little question. Something I've noticed, why is it when you go into a shop to purchase either a watch or a clock, the hands are always set at 10:10? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I think the big thing is that's usually where the trademark of the clock manufacturer is above the hands.
Okay.
And so they do that to kind of outline their trademark.
Sure.
Years back, it used to be the trademark was below the hands, so then the clocks were set at 8:20. But here recently, it's the
okay.
10:10 because the trademark is normally above the hands. Yeah.
How interesting.
That's something
Have
for
you ever
them.
been asked that question before?
Once or twice, but not very often.
All right. Well, unfortunately, our time is ticking away. Excuse the pun, but I had to make it work. Thank you, Mark.
Oh,
thank you,
thank you.
Taylor, for being
So,
with us today. I think your business is truly a gem in Lincoln, and
Well,
I know it will continue for
I
generations.
appreciate that.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much. And Live and Learn will continue after this.
What does Medicare cover? How can I afford to keep living in my home? When I need help with house and yard work, who can I turn to? Why am I so tired? Am I eating right? Should I exercise? Where can I go for answers to my questions about aging?
Aging Partners is the place to call when you have questions on aging. Our experts are here to help you with unbiased answers for you or your loved ones. Aging Partners, we're only a phone call away.
Hello, I'm Tim Francis with Live and Learn. My guest today is retired home builder Bob Peterson. Mr. Peterson, your family started a construction company, residential construction company, during the Depression, is that right?
Yes, my father, Irvin Peterson, worked for a College View home builder. He bought the assets of that construction company in 1932 for $150.
So he started his construction career
in his own
on
name.
His own name,
Yep.
with a $150 investment,
Yes.
in probably one of the worst years of the Depression.
Same year I was born.
So it was an important year for the Peterson family.
Yes, that's right.
What was business community like where did your customers come from?
Well, in
initially?
those early days, they were all custom buyers that happened to be able to afford a new house and apparently realized this was a good time to buy a house or build a house.
There wouldn't have been a lot of competition for
Everybody was looking for
everyone was eager
work.
for work.
Yeah.
And so there's a few of those houses still around town you would identify for us, I
Oh
suppose.
yes, oh yes, yes. I got pictures of most of them.
That'd be an interesting file to look at sometime.
Yep.
So then, preparatory to World War II, your father got a contract with the Defense Department in Omaha, in Bellevue. Did you do some work?
I don't know exactly what year this happened, but the War Department came into the picture, and the nation was industrializing for war, and one of the ways they were doing that was building a bomber plant at Bellevue, or Fort Crook, Nebraska, and they offered critical building materials to attract builders to the areas where they wanted the houses built. And somehow or other he found out about that, and the little company he had responded and went to Bellevue to build houses, 56 houses initially, and they had to finish developing lots. The lots were platted apparently, but not served with utilities, so they're building houses and completing the utilities all at once.
Sounds like a kind of a mad scramble to
All rush.
to get housing put up for the
Yep.
defense workers.
Yes, that's right. 1, 2, and 3 bedroom houses built under FHA, low down payments.
And FHA was fairly a new program at that time, wasn't it?
Well, FHA was formed in 1934. The National Housing Act, I think they called it.
The part of the New Deal, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
So your company probably gained a lot of expertise in building a lot of houses quickly
Yes.
during the war.
Yeah.
Did that come into play after the war, when there was a lot of demand?
Well, yes. The Bellevue project probably was under construction in 41, 42, maybe a little bit in 43, and then there was another one over in Wahoo, connection with the plant at Meade that loaded bombs, I think. And then at the end of the war, they were working out in Hastings, and the housing was in connection with the Naval Ammunition Depot at Hastings. So there were 3 communities involved for Peterson. And then when the war was over, there was a great shortage of housing because none had been built for the general population during the war, essentially. So there was a huge demand, and they chose to come back to Lincoln and do the building in Lincoln.
So probably the 50s and 60s were kind of the high water mark for new construction for a while. You built a lot of houses.
Yes.
What part of Lincoln did you concentrate in? Where would be the biggest example of your work?
Well, over the years, pretty well all over the community. The initial group of houses immediately as the war was ending was over around 40th and Garfield area. And then we built quite a few out in northeast Lincoln. And for quite a while, there were lots available that had been platted during the 30s and not used during the 40s, and then available. So it was possible to run on existing lots for quite a while. There were quite a few out around 40th and Van Dorn, out in that area. We've heard of Vice President Cheney being born in Lincoln and living out in that area, and I don't know as he lived in one of our houses, but we built a lot out in that area.
Out by the new Southeast High School.
Yeah,
the
eventual, yeah.
Yeah.
And then at a point it became necessary to start platting new subdivisions. And one of those was immediately west of the future Southeast High School. My wife and I bought one of them in 1955 on Pawnee Street, watched Southeast High built, and then our son attended kindergarten there for a while. But the first extensive subdivision the company did was Park Manor, which is over around 56 and Sumner.
Okay, so that's a pretty well laid out, planned neighborhood.
Yes.
It has still sustained its value.
Yes.
It's still a sought after.
And there was an addition to it called Park Manor East that ran over to where May Morley School is now.
What would be a typical size, square footage size for a new home in the mid-50s or late 50s then?
Well, a lot of these affordable homes we were building on a speculative basis were as small as 800 square feet, some even smaller than that, and either had no garage or one garage. And a lot of them were on slabs.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them had radiant heat.
That's kind of a new thing, considered a new thing right now, I think.
Yeah, it's depicted as new, but it was.
It's been new twice. It was new then.
In that era that we're talking about, why the Levitt Company was doing a lot of building in New England Long Island and so forth, and widely publicized. So some of the ideas that were coming forth out of that were used by us.
Did you ever do much by way of commercial construction? Or?
Yes. We built quite a few square feet for Cushman Motor Works as it then existed, and had some other commercial customers. Hill Hatchery was one of them. There's a building down there on 10th Street that the university now owns that we built, still doing its job.
Still serving.
Yep.
Still serving. But you've kind of had several careers. One career leads to the next.
Fortunately.
So tell me a little bit about going back to law school as a middle-aged guy.
Well, our company did not survive the high interest rate days of the earlier part of the 80s, where we were paying as much as 22% interest rate for money we had borrowed. And so it was eventually necessary to go find other employment. And I had always wanted to go to law school. I had attended a bar association talkback thing back in the late 70s, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I'd like to do that, but we were busy and everything, all the reasons not to. But anyway, I started law school in 1986, I guess, graduated in 1989.
And that kind of evolved into a job with HUD. Did you do some work?
Well, as I was within 12 hours of graduation, I had the opportunity to be the development director for the HUD office in Omaha. So I was representing FHA at that point. And so that was a good opportunity, and I seized it and worked there for 13 years.
And then that has kind of led into affordable housing and some expertise that way.
Yes, of course, at FHA, working in the FHA program, it was an affordable housing area. But during that time, some builders in Lincoln, Fred Hoppe and Greg Schwinn and Rick Kruger, started a nonprofit known as Nebraska Housing Resource, and started developing lots for affordable building for other builders largely. And I first worked for them on my odd time as a volunteer, and then later, after I retired from HUD, I became their executive director.
So how many houses would that group have built over the course of your tenure with them?
Well, that group probably built 150 perhaps.
Our time's gone very quickly here, and I could mine your depth a whole lot more for more information, but we're about out of time. Do you follow current construction and current trends and what the public are buying now and what builders are putting up?
Yes, my primary source for local is the Parade of Homes.
So you follow that?
Yes.
And make comparisons between what you built and what they're building perhaps?
Yes.
And the amenities that we have to have now and versus what your customers?
Triple garages and lots of square footage.
Mr. Peterson, I thank you so much for being with us today. It's fascinating to visit with somebody who was born in Lincoln, worked in Lincoln, had a career in Lincoln, and still participates. And I wish we had a little more time and go a little bit further. For Live and Learn, I'm Tim Francis. Thank you for joining us.
What does Medicare cover? How can I afford to keep living in my home? When I need help with house and yard work, who can I turn to? Why am I so tired? Am I eating right? Should I exercise? Where can I go for answers to my questions about aging?
Aging Partners is the place to call when you have questions on aging. Our experts are here to help you with unbiased answers for you or your loved ones. Aging Partners, we're only a phone call away.
Welcome back to Live and Learn. I'm Sam Truax, and today we're going to discuss diabetes to make everyone more aware of this growing disease. Here to help us understand diabetes a little better is Tracy Foreman, the community health educator from Aging Partners Health and Fitness, and Mary Tinez, a registered nurse in independent practice who specializes in foot care and who does some practice on Aging Partners clientele. Tracy, can you describe diabetes and the difference between type 1 and type 2?
Well, type 1 diabetes is usually insulin dependent, and it is a chronic condition that affects our pancreas. Our pancreas is no longer able to produce enough insulin to break our food down into energy and feed our cellular structure. Type 2 diabetes is usually lifestyle related or environment related, but both types of diabetes usually have some hereditary factors, not always, but in many cases. Type 2 usually has a higher percentage of hereditary factors than type 1 even. So.
Well, Mary, how is foot care related to diabetes?
Well, one of the most startling complications of having diabetes is that it affects your microcirculation, and the microcirculation is seen most clearly in your fingers, your toes, your eyes, your kidneys, where the circulation narrows and causes a breakdown in circulation and a breakdown in cellular activity there. And so feet have the most problem because they're at the end of the line and gravity doesn't help.
Well, I'm sure you encounter many other foot care concerns in your practice, such as the yellowing of toenails and thickening of toenails and night foot pain and such. that are probably that aren't necessarily related to diabetes?
I see most of the people that come to me have one of those problems or another, but very often they are related to diabetes. A lot of the diabetics I see will have those issues because, it's a circulation issue. If you don't have proper circulation, your system can't take care of those cells well. And so you get more of the fungus type toenails. You get the neuropathy, the symptoms that cause pain in the feet and all of that kind of thing. So it's very much related.
So it's better if I say I have sore feet or neuropathy. They'd be more impressed if I have neuropathy instead of sore feet, huh?
Well, it works that way.
Tracy, tell us the symptoms that folks should look for that would suggest to them that they should consult their doctor about diabetes.
Well, I've been an insulin-dependent diabetic for about 36 years, and when I first discovered I had diabetes, I noticed that I had lost a lot of weight. I had lost about 25 pounds in a relatively short period of time. I had excessive thirst. I was urinating all the time. I was sleepy all the time. My muscles hurt. I was irritable, and the list goes on and on. But I think the most common symptoms are weight loss or weight gain, depending. It's different. Usually with type 1, they experience a weight loss, and oftentimes weight gain contributes to type 2 diabetes. Yes. So the thirst and the blurred vision was another symptom that I experienced. Pain in feet or in your hands. So
what is the best way for diabetics to combat their problems? Except, of course, we know insulin, but
yes. Well, the first thing, of course, is to go to a doctor that works with persons with diabetes and get your A1C check. That's your tattletale test, I call it, that tells how well your control has been over the last 90 days. And they can tell you through a fasting blood sugar or glucose how your blood sugars are running, and then get on a regimen of checking your blood sugars on a regular basis. And if you are needing to go on insulin, find what the best types of insulin are for your diabetes, and if you should be on long-acting or short-acting. Of course, that's something you would do with your doctor. It's fundamental, whether you are type 1 or type 2, to eat healthy and watch your portion sizes and cut back on your high-fat, high-sugar foods, and also to exercise. And I can see a great difference in my blood sugars when I am exercising regularly.
Yes, I understand. When you're exercising, your metabolism changes a little bit, and it's better able to handle that. As a matter of fact, staying active and controlling your weight is a good way to avoid diabetes also, because you won't, not so much of the diabetes is weight related for people who
yes,
aren't
oftentimes
active.
type 2 is related to weight.
Yes,
So.
yes, yeah, what type 1. Mary, what precautions should diabetics be aware of in caring for their feet?
There's some very basic things you need to do. You need to make sure you have good fitting shoes. If you have ill-fitting shoes that don't protect, don't support your feet, that cause calluses, blisters, again, those things don't heal very well if you have microcirculation problems. Daily foot care is really important. A diabetic really has to check their feet every single day. And if you can't pick up your foot and look on the bottom of it or check between your toes, take a mirror and put it on the floor and just see, did I step on anything? Are there any red spots, any black spots? Are there any development of blisters? Your feet should be washed every day with mild soap and water. And a big issue that I see with a lot of people is they forget they have to dry between their toes. And that sounds like a little thing, but if you develop a fungal infection or the moisture just increases the opportunity for an infection to develop, then you're looking for trouble. You also need to make sure that you always wear shoes. A lot of people like to walk barefoot, but if you have, especially if you have neuropathy issues, your feet are starting to get numb, then you could easily step on a sharp rock or a pin, injure your foot and never know it. So, or stub your toe and not even really be aware of it. people will come in with just a black toenail and have no idea how it happened. So just wearing slippers or some type of shoes all the time is really important for a diabetic.
I understand even cutting the toenails is something that they need to be more careful of then.
It's why I see many people, because they've come to the point where either their vision has become limited or their flexibility or just how much sensation they have in their feet, and they could cut their toe and not realize it and then have a wound that they have a hard time dealing with. And so it doesn't, if they're able to see their toenails, they're able to examine their feet well on their own. If they have the strength to take care of those heavy nails, they really don't need a nurse to do it. But if they have any of those limitations, it's good to get someone who's trained in foot care. An ounce of prevention is really worth a pound of cure there.
So in a lot of cases, that's what people are asking you to do, is actually look at the bottom of their feet and trim their toenails and
exactly.
all the things, and it couldn't be better than have an expert actually doing their foot care. So, well, does diabetes mean that you can never have any sugar, Tracy? Is that?
Shun the thought. I learned early on that diabetes is not a death sentence. It's something you can live with and live well with if you choose to. But to understand that food counts when you are a diabetic, and you need to be aware that most things that we eat are carbohydrates, and carbohydrates do affect our blood sugar. So the more we take in, and of course that includes your cake, cookies, candies, and your breads, rices, cereals, pastas, those types of things, that all converts in our body to glucose. And so we just need to watch our portions and understand how those carbs work in relation to our insulin. And it's not terribly difficult, but it takes a little extra work.
Well, I know in your health and fitness activities for the Aging Partners, essentially, you do have a lot of people that an opportunity, at least, to stay active.
Absolutely.
And again, do people kind of direct toward your help there, or that are diabetic, or is that just most people trying to keep their weight down and things like that?
Not all people understand that exercise is fundamental when you are a diabetic, but we do get a lot of people who have to watch their blood sugars when they're working out, and so I can work directly with them to help them set up an exercise program that's appropriate for them, and always encourage them to check their blood sugars before they exercise.
That's excellent. So they could actually have a kind of a personal trainer's direction to how they do, as long as they don't hurt their feet. You can't have any exercise that hurt feet.
I am right on board with Mary when she says wear the right shoes. That is so important.
Well, that is good. If any of the viewers have questions, our two guests today can be reached by contacting Aging Partners, and I'd like to thank our guests today. It's Tracy Foreman, who is with Health and Fitness at Aging Partners, and Mary Tinez, who's with Nebraska Nursing Consultants and also works with Aging Partners. Thank you, ladies. That was interesting. Do we have anything else that we can advise the people of?
One thing that I wanted to note is when people go to see their doctor, a lot of them doctor's offices have started to put up a sign saying, "Take off your shoes." Just to remind the people when they see their doctor, and also to remind the doctor that they need to take a look at their feet. So just automatically take off your shoes when you go see your doctor.
Yeah, that does bring up the question, though, of how much the doctor would get involved in foot care, because the pediatrician, I guess, would, but their general practitioner would probably direct that to you or somebody, huh?
Yeah, they can make a recommendation, but also how the doctor would check their A1C. And that's a direct relationship to how well their feet respond.
Well, that's good. Again, I want to thank our guests today, Tracy Foreman and Mary Tinez. Live and Learn will be back shortly.
What does Medicare cover? How can I afford to keep living in my home? When I need help with house and yard work, who can I turn to? Why am I so tired? Am I eating right? Should I exercise? Where can I go for answers to my questions about aging?
Aging Partners is the place to call when you have questions on aging. Our experts are here to help you with unbiased answers for you or your loved ones. Aging Partners, we're only a phone call away.
Hello, my name is Chris Beckenbaugh. My guest today on Live and Learn is Lisa Anderson with Madonna Rehab Hospital. Thank you for being here, Lisa.
Sure.
One of the issues that's important to us at Aging Partners, as well as seniors in general, is independence. And part of that independence we often find comes with the ability to drive a vehicle. Lisa is a specialist over at Madonna, and we appreciate you coming in and talking today about the driver program.
Sure.
Can you tell me how long have you been at Madonna?
I have been at Madonna almost 17 years.
Okay, and you started there as an occupational therapist?
Right, just treating daily, normal patients that come in.
Okay, what sort of things does an occupational therapist do that's different from a physical therapist, for those of us who may not know?
We focus on daily living activities, and that can be as simple as brushing your teeth, to getting dressed in the morning, to getting to a job, getting out in the community to do grocery shopping, and all the activities that might impact that.
Okay, so that's different than a physical therapist who deals with those larger muscles and rehabilitation
More
of
the
those.
mobility and walking and things like that.
So when did you become involved in the driver program?
I became involved about 3 or 4 years of my time at Madonna. There was a need for someone to fill in and kind of be a backup person, and so I did some mentoring to get some training to do it. And then about 2 or 3 years later, I just became the full-time person that did it.
Great. So tell me, what kind of people might come to have some expertise from your program?
We have a large variety. It can be someone that's been injured or had a stroke or some kind of disability that might have changed how they drove before. Or we also see folks that maybe have never driven and are considering starting to drive, but they have a disability. So like a 16-year-old that has a leg that isn't as long or is weaker than the other. And then we also see folks that maybe are changing as they age, that we would need to evaluate to see if they continue to be safe.
Okay, so they can call and make an appointment with you.
Yes.
Do they need a doctor's order to do that?
They do need a doctor's order.
Okay.
And we also want them to have a driver's license currently, or a learner's permit if they have never driven before, or maybe they've lost their license, things like that.
Okay, so they've taken that state test, they've gone through that, they've got the identification, they're ready to drive, and then they come to you.
Right.
And you're going to do several levels of assessment with them. Talk us through that.
So we do about an hour of testing in the clinic, in the building, where we check their vision, make sure they meet all requirements that the state requires, and then also look at some other areas that can impact driving, like depth perception, their peripheral vision, how well they see around, and some perceptual things like judging space, things like that. And then we'll do some things where we look at kind of their thinking skills, how well they can do 2 things at once and shift their attention. And then we do some reaction time things. And that can be motor reaction, where we're having them move their leg back and forth between gas and brake, or it can be just something cognitive and that they have to respond quickly and show that kind of processing speed. So,
Boy, I can sure see how somebody who maybe has had a traumatic brain injury or a stroke, these things could all be affected.
They can be, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And a family member obviously may have concerns, but isn't really able to judge the way that you are in your clinic.
Right. We kind of have what is deemed as normal, in a range, and we know that people change from as they age, or even behaviors of driving. What you've learned from your past history from driving. So it can really vary, but we try to deem what keeps you safe and how you can stay on the road and be safe.
Okay, so somebody who comes to your clinic and they pass that cognitive function, they have the reaction time, they're able to see in all directions and see clearly. What happens next?
We do some things on a simulator, which is a machine that it's a video screen that they look at, and they're driving on that. And then if all of those things go well, then we go out in a vehicle and drive with them out on the roads of Lincoln.
Okay.
So
in their own car or your car?
we take Madonna's car, and it's kind of a training vehicle where we have a brake on our passenger side so we can have a little more control of the vehicle. And then we also have some equipment that we could try if that's something that they maybe are needing or considering using.
Okay, so some adaptive devices,
Right.
like what sorts of things might
We
be
have
available?
some things for the steering wheel if they have like decreased grip, so they could hold on to that or get placed in it. We also have a hand control, which is gas and brake. So if they can't use their legs or maybe their legs are weak, they can use the hand control to drive. So part of the assessment is determining which of those things might be good for them.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody gets through this, they get through the driving portion, then do you send them home with a certificate, or what happens then?
Well, we like, part of the process is that we have the doctor's order, and so we do make recommendations, and I know I review them with the client before they leave the clinic, but we do send a report to the physician and also ask for their input. So, for example, if we have concerns about a person, we might ask the physician to kind of maybe consider restricting the client or saying, you know, we need to do some therapy to work on some things to see if they could drive, things like that. So I try to recommend if they're safe, do they need training, do they need therapy, or maybe they need to retire from driving. So all that goes to the physician too as well, and kind of he gives input as to what his opinion is, and then can maybe write orders for therapy or different things like that.
So you're not here to take someone's license from them.
That's right.
And you're not here to just give people carte blanche to go drive. That's really up to the state.
It is.
Right?
It is. They issue the license, and they kind of
We'll decide
look,
if
yes.
someone's not appropriate to drive.
That's right.
You make a recommendation.
Right.
Does anybody come and see you more than once? Do you
Yes.
do ongoing
We do, and
training?
that's where we consider it more training, where we'll ask them to say, okay, are you willing to come back for so many visits? And usually when we do those, it's about an hour of time just in the vehicle, typically. And it could be practicing with the equipment that we're recommending, or just maybe working on some skills, whether it's scanning the environment better or judging distance better for stopping, things like that. So that trying to give them tips and things that can keep them safe longer.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
We definitely want to keep our streets safe.
That's right.
And you've been doing this for a number of years.
Right.
Have you seen changes in the availability of adaptive devices?
Yes, technology is one of the things that offers a lot of different things. You know, there have rear cameras now that can give you alerts if you're backing up and there's something there. GPS is certainly one of the things too that could help if you have trouble navigating an environment. So that has really kind of stepped things up a lot to keep people safer and give you input. And there's a lot of different things you can do with mirrors as well to help you see the environment better. So those are all things that can help.
And none of those are a distraction.
Usually not.
We
no.
try to avoid those distractions
Right.
in the car, right?
Right, that's
the
right.
cell phone, the
Yes.
eating, all of those
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
We all need to avoid those.
Yeah. And I know I don't use the radio. I do converse with the patient, you know, when we're driving, but I try to mentor that as well.
Are there any other services that you can think of that go hand in hand with this sort of training that you offer?
Well, a lot of times if we're recommending equipment, there has to be a vendor or someone to install the equipment, and also make sure that your vehicle is appropriate to install it. And so I rely on some local vendors for that. And the state of Nebraska Assistive Technology can help with some of those things too. And so oftentimes we're making recommendations, and then they're the ones that actually see the vehicle get equipped with as we recommend.
Boy, I just had no idea, and I'm
Yes.
sure our viewers didn't either.
Right.
What if I'm a child with a senior parent and I have a concern? Where's my first call?
I think it needs to be with the physician because they know the background of the patient and maybe know if there's been changes, and they can write the prescription and make the referral for the driving test, and because we're going to ask them, in the end to follow up as well, because they're going to maintain that relationship with the client.
That's great. What are the charges for your services?
We charge, it's $250, but it is something that we bill insurance for. It's an occupational therapy evaluation. And so oftentimes Medicare and other private policies will cover the cost of it. And that's something we will bill, and then they will find out if it's going to be covered.
Okay. So it may be an out-of-pocket expense for someone.
It could be, yes. And it kind of, with Medicare currently in outpatient, there is a limitation on dollar amount that you can spend in a year. And so it depends on if they've had other therapies and that kind of thing, whether it would fit into that cost.
So somebody could call your office and have that conversation ahead of time if they're concerned about that.
And we have someone that verifies a lot of the benefits and things like that to make sure that we know and what they can expect.
Great. So how would someone get a hold of you? Where do we start the process?
Okay, you can call at, should I give the number?
Sure.
Okay, it's 402-413-3900. And that will be a receptionist, and if you have more specific questions, then they can direct you to the right person.
And
myself, and there's another therapist that also does the testing.
And they can go to your website.
Yes.
And get information there.
Yes.
And hopefully all the local physicians will have that information as well.
Yes, that's right.
Lisa, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
I know I've learned a lot. I'm sure our viewers have as well. And remember, it's never too late to live and learn.